The stuff that's sitting just in front of me is a representation of a fairly typical Raspberry Pi setup. You got your keyboard, your mouse, your Raspberry Pi 4, and then some kind of screen. And although it's pretty decent for a simple project, it's not very mobile and it can get in the way of a lot of stuff. That's where this new product comes in. This is the Raspberry Pi Pi 400, which is the newest addition to the Raspberry Pi family of products. It combines the versatility of the Raspberry Pi with a standard keyboard, making it great for moving around due to its compact design. So the Raspberry Pi Pi 400 arrived in this box. So opening it up, we can see that the Pi 400 is at the top. Let's go ahead and remove that. Set that off to the side. Go ahead and remove the spacer. And then we get to the accessories. So first up is the official Raspberry Pi mouse, the official Raspberry Pi USB-C power supply, and this can supply 5.1 volts at up to 3 amps, which should be plenty for almost any task you can throw at the Pi 4. And then finally on this level we have a little adapter for the micro SD card in case you want to flash it or update the OS. So removing this bit here, you can see that we have a micro HDMI to HDMI cable. And then finally, a pretty well illustrated booklet that goes into detail about how to set up the Raspberry Pi, simple projects that you can do with it, and programming guides. So now that we've gotten unboxed, let's get into the specs. So as the name suggests, the Pi 400 contains a Raspberry Pi. It has a Broadcom BCM2711 SoC, which is comprised of a quad-core ARM Cortex A72. It has LP DDR4 RAM that's clocked at 3200 MHz. It has a 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi chipset with Bluetooth 5. It has 2 USB 3.0 ports. It has 2 USB 2.0 ports, although one is taken internally by the keyboard. It has 2 HDMI connectors. It has a USB-C for power in. It has the 40-pin GPIO connector, which is the standard Raspberry Pi pinout. And then it also has a micro SD card slot and gigabit Ethernet. So I've gone ahead and set it up like how you typically find a Raspberry Pi project done. So we have our 7-inch HDMI display. We have our mouse plugged in to the USB 2 port. We have HDMI, power for the display coming off of USB 3, and then USB-C in for power. So this project will involve a sensor and then a few LEDs so we can see the output. It will rely on the NPU 6050, which is a combination of a gyroscope and accelerometer in one package. We'll need 3 LEDs, so I have 3 different colors, so red, green, and blue. And then you also need 3 220 ohm resistors to limit the amount of current the LEDs draw. Along with that, you'll need a few supporting components, so a mini breadboard, and then a few jumper wires for connecting everything together. So to begin, we'll go ahead and take our breadboard, which is right here, and then attach the ground and power to one side of the rails. Then we'll start to insert our resistors. So one end will go into the ground rail, and the other end will go into a column on the breadboard. So we'll space them out fairly evenly. And next up, we should go ahead and attach our LEDs. So on an LED, you have 2 leads. So the long end of it is called the anode, and that's positive, and the shorter end is called cathode, and that is negative. So when attaching it, we'll need to make sure that the cathode goes to the resistor portion of it. Go ahead and attach it like so, and then do that for every LED after that. So we got red one right here, and then finally the green. So next, each LED will then get its own jumper wire, and that will go directly to the Raspberry Pi to drive it. So go ahead and put just the green one for the green, yellow for the red, and then the brown one for the blue. Okay, so these can all go off to the side, because now it's time for the start of the show, the NPU 6050. This communicates either through SPI, or the Serial Peripheral Interface, or through I2C. For this example, we'll just be going over I²C, so we can go and attach it to the breadboard. Attach a single jumper wire from the VCC pin on the MPU 6050 and place that into the positive rail. And then we'll need a second one going from the ground pin over to the ground rail. And then finally, we'll take our last jumper wire, and then one pin goes to the clock, or SCL, and the other one goes to the data pin, or SDA. Next, these pins all will plug into our GPIO header, which is right here. So now it's time to go and get programming. Here's the breadboard that's connected to the Pi's GPIO header. And as you can see, when I rotate it along the x-axis, certain LEDs light up. So currently, there's a range of plus or minus 30 from 0 as the middle. So that means that beyond positive 30, the blue LED will light up. And then below negative 30, the red LED will light up. So this is a pretty fun and simple project to get started with the Raspberry Pi 400. So the Raspberry Pi 400 is a great product from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. It combines the best of both worlds and minimizes the amount of cable sprawl you'll have. I think it'd be great in an educational setting where space is quite limited. So you can just set up a station comprised of a monitor, mouse, and one of these, along with a breadboard. And that'll allow students of any type to learn programming and electronics with ease. This has been Hackster Spotlight. I've been your host, Evan Rust, and I want to see you next time for the next Hackster Spotlight episode.